Well, Ben, closely related to our feelings and emotion is conscience. And it's a very common thing for people to say, well, I'll just let my conscience be my guide. My conscience could not lead me astray. And yet, the conscience can often lead you astray. Your conscience actually can only do what it's been taught to do. Now, our conscience should warn us about something that's wrong, and it should encourage us in something that's right. But the conscience can only do what it's been trained to do. And the Apostle Paul is another interesting example where he did things in good conscience, but he was wrong in what he did, Ben.
Yeah, there's a couple of places where we could look. My Bible is turned to Acts 23:1, where Paul is, I think, given an account of what happened in his life. And Paul said in verse 1, Paul, looking intently at the council, said, "Brethren, I have lived my life with a perfectly good conscience before God up to this day." And, I think he rehearsed to them, who he used to be and things like that. And so our conscience can ultimately be the guide or authority. In 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, Paul said, "But the Spirit explicitly says that in latter times some will fall away from the faith, paying attention to deceitful spirits and doctrines of demons, by means of the hypocrisy of liars, seared in their own conscience as with a brand in iron." And so our consciences can be trained correctly and also incorrectly. And so that's why the standard is going to be important.
So in Acts 23:1, Paul said that he lived in good conscience.
Yeah.
But as he lived in good conscience, in the text in Acts 26, verse 9, he talks about what he did during that time. He said, "Indeed, I myself thought I must do many things contrary to the name of Jesus of Nazareth." And so Paul was actually persecuting Christians, and yet it didn't bother his conscience at all. He was doing what he thought he ought to do.
Yeah.
And so he was being a man who was conscientious. Answer this question, Ben. If the conscience is a valid standard, then how many standards do we have in the world?
Billions?
Yeah, 6 billion, because that's how many people we have.
Yeah.
And your conscience might be a little bit different than mine, and that might be okay. But the question is, if a man's conscience is what he's going to operate by, another man may do the opposite from him and still be doing it feeling good about it.
That's really the problem, too, when you look at the bigger picture with having a worldview with respect to atheism. What do people do when it comes to morality? Atheists, I believe, many of them are moral people, and they do many moral things. But the problem goes back to what is the standard? Because if there is no God, if there is no authority, if there is no standard, then everything is really subjective. And that's why we have to have some kind of authority. Otherwise, we're going to end up like the people in the days of Israel, where they did whatever they thought was right in their own sight.
That's right. Thinking one more time about the Apostle Paul, what he did conscientiously, but that didn't change wrong to right. It didn't change error to truth on Paul's part.
Yep.
He was a religious man, but he was religiously wrong. And he was conscientiously wrong. I think it's important to understand that.